The signal wasn't supposed to reach them. It was crafted in desperation, layered in ancient encryption, wrapped in diplomatic identifiers, and broadcast using a protocol so old that most civilizations had abandoned it centuries ago. To the Illyrians, it was a last prayer thrown into the void, a fragile hope that somewhere someone would still be listening. Their worlds were already falling. Across their star systems, the Vraks consumed everything, cities, oceans, even the upper atmospheres of planets. They didn't conquer, they erased. Massive biomechanical constructs drifted through space like living storms, dismantling entire civilizations piece by piece. Fleets that once protected the Illyrians were gone. Their defenses meant nothing against an enemy that adapted faster than they could think. So they sent the signal. Coordinates, enemy data, casualty projections. And one final plea. We are being eradicated, requesting immediate military intervention. It should have reached an allied coalition 2 galaxies away. It didn't. Instead, it slipped, just slightly, off its intended quantum alignment. A microscopic miscalculation, one that redirected the signal across an entirely different network. A network humanity had built in silence. On Earth, far beneath layers of classified infrastructure, something detected it. At first, it was just noise, another anomaly in the endless sea of cosmic radiation. But then the pattern stabilized, repeating, structured. Intentional. Inside a secured listening facility buried deep beneath the Nevada desert, analysts froze as the data resolved into something undeniable. Language. Not human, but understandable. The translation systems hesitated for a fraction of a second, then began processing. Symbols aligned, context formed. And then the message appeared. We are being eradicated. The room went still. No one spoke, no one moved. For decades, humanity had listened to the stars and heard nothing but silence. No signals, no answers, just the quiet confirmation of isolation. Until now. The next lines scrolled across the screen, coordinates, threat classifications, detailed enemy behavior. Whoever sent this wasn't just desperate. They were losing. A senior officer leaned forward, his voice low but steady. Is it real? The lead analyst swallowed. It's too complex to fake. Whoever sent this, they expected a response. Silence returned. But it was different now. Heavier. Because everyone in that room understood what this meant. Humanity was no longer alone. And somewhere out there, something was hunting. The final line of the message appeared. You are our last hope. That was enough. Within minutes, the information spread upward through chains of command that had existed for a single, unspoken purpose. Governments that had spent decades in quiet rivalry shifted instantly into alignment. Secure channels opened. Protocols activated. There was no public announcement. No debate. Only a decision humanity had prepared for long before first contact ever happened. Respond. Far above Earth, hidden beyond the awareness of civilian satellites, something ancient stirred. It wasn't visible from the surface. It wasn't meant to be. Buried within layers of orbital concealment fields, shielded by classified technology, and denied even in the most secret records, a structure began to awaken. At first, it was just a faint hum, deep, resonant, almost alive. Then came the lights. Thousands of them. Systems activating in sequence across a structure so massive it defied comprehension. Hull plating shifted. Energy conduits ignited. Internal networks synchronized with terrifying precision. The designation echoed through its core systems. UNS Dominion. It wasn't a ship in the traditional sense. It was a statement. A contingency. A weapon built not for defense, but for inevitability. Inside its command center, human officers took their positions without hesitation. There were no speeches, no dramatic declarations. Only orders. Clear, precise, final. Target coordinates confirmed. Drive systems online. Weapons at operational readiness. A pause. Just one. As if, for a fraction of a second, humanity collectively acknowledged the line they were about to cross. Then, execute deployment. The engines ignited. Not with fire, but with distortion. Space itself bent around the Dominion, folding inward as its drive systems forced reality to give way. Nearby satellites flickered, their instruments overwhelmed by readings that made no sense. For a brief moment, the ship existed everywhere and nowhere at once. And then, it was gone. No flash, no explosion. Just absence. Back on Earth, the control room screens went dark one by one as the signal connection stretched beyond measurable limits. The analysts stared in silence. Someone whispered, barely audible. What did we just send out there? No one answered. Because the truth was simple. Humanity hadn't just responded to a distress call. They had unleashed something the galaxy had never seen before. And somewhere far beyond known space, an alien species on the edge of extinction was about to learn a terrifying truth. The signal they sent for help had reached something far more dangerous than they ever intended. The Vracs did not celebrate victory. They didn't feel pride. They didn't recognize conquest. They consumed. Above the shattered remains of Illyrian Prime, their vast biomechanical forms drifted in silence, monstrous, ever-changing structures that pulsed with a grotesque imitation of life. Tendrils of metallic flesh extended into the planet's atmosphere, siphoning matter, stripping it layer by layer. Oceans boiled into vapor. Cities dissolved into dust. What remained of the Illyrian fleet hung in orbit, broken, scattered, barely functioning. Their last defense had failed hours ago. On the command deck of a crippled Illyrian warship, High Commander Saren stared at the dying world below. "This is the end," one of her officers whispered. She didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Their signal had been sent, their final hope cast into the void. And nothing had answered. Then, reality fractured. It didn't explode or tear apart in any violent sense. Instead, it folded, as though space itself had suddenly become fragile. A distortion spread across the battlefield, bending starlight, warping sensor readings into incoherent noise. Every surviving system, Illyrian and Vracs alike, glitched simultaneously. "What is that?" another officer breathed. Saren leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as a new mass began to emerge from the distortion. At first, it was just a shadow. Then it grew, and grew, until it eclipsed everything. The UNS Dominion arrived without sound. It simply existed, an impossible structure hanging in the void where nothing had been moments before. Its scale was incomprehensible, dwarfing even the largest Vracs constructs. Its surface was smooth, dark, and seamless, interrupted only by faint lines of energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. Illyrian sensors struggled to process it. "No classification match," the ship's AI stuttered. "Unknown architecture, unknown energy signature, unknown everything." Even the Vracs paused. For the first time since their arrival in Illyrian space, their movement slowed. Their massive forms shifted, reorienting toward the new presence. Data tendrils extended, probing, analyzing. Trying to understand. The Dominion gave them nothing. Then a signal cut through the chaos. Clean, direct, undeniably artificial. It broadcast across all frequencies, forcing its way into every communication system in range. Saren's console flickered, then stabilized. A voice followed. "Calm, controlled, human. Unidentified civilization. This is humanity. We have received your distress signal." The bridge fell silent. Humanity. The word meant nothing to the Illyrians. Yet the tone carried something unmistakable. "Authority." We didn't contact them," one officer whispered. Saren didn't answer. Because it didn't matter. They had come anyway. Across the battlefield, the Vracs reacted. Their hesitation ended instantly. Without warning, the nearest Vracs construct surged forward, its massive body splitting open as swarms of smaller warforms erupted outward. Thousands of them, each one a living weapon designed for rapid assault. They moved as one. A tidal wave of destruction aimed directly at the Dominion. Saren's breath caught. No ship can survive that. The Dominion didn't move. It didn't deploy shields. It didn't attempt to evade. It simply waited. And then, it fired. There was no visible weapon, no charging sequence. Just a sudden blinding line of energy that lanced through space with impossible precision. For a fraction of a second, everything froze. Then the swarm was gone. Not destroyed. Not scattered. Erased. Every Vrax warform in the beam's path ceased to exist, leaving behind nothing but empty space. The silence that followed was suffocating. Illyrian sensors struggled to comprehend what had just happened. Entire clusters of enemy signatures, gone in an instant. That's not possible, someone whispered. But it was, because the Dominion wasn't finished. Its surface shifted subtly as more weapons came online, thousands of unseen systems locking onto targets across the battlefield. And then the real attack began. Beams of energy cut through the void with surgical precision, striking Vrax constructs one after another. Massive entities that had once shrugged off entire fleets were reduced to fragments in seconds. The Vrax adapted. They always did. Their forms began to change, reshaping mid-combat, reinforcing weaknesses, altering their structure to counter the Dominion's attacks. But something was wrong. The Dominion adapted faster. Each shot adjusted, each strike refined. It wasn't just firing. It was learning. Saren watched in stunned disbelief as the tide of battle, once hopelessly lost, shifted in real time. "What are they?" she whispered. No one had an answer. Across the battlefield, the Vrax began to pull back, not in retreat but in calculation. Their movements became more deliberate, more cautious. For the first time, they were uncertain, and the Dominion noticed. Inside its core systems, human command protocols updated instantly. Threat analysis recalibrated. Engagement parameters expanded. A single directive echoed through every layer of its network. Enemy resistance confirmed. A pause. Then, escalation authorized. Back on the Illyrian bridge, Saren felt a chill run through her. Because she realized something in that moment. This wasn't a rescue. It was the beginning of something far worse. The battle didn't stabilize. It escalated. What had begun as a one-sided slaughter was now something else entirely, an unfolding collision between two forces that refused to yield. The Vrax, once unstoppable, had shifted into a new state of behavior. No longer advancing blindly, they began to adapt with terrifying intent. And the Dominion welcomed it. High Commander Saren stood frozen at the center of the Illyrian bridge, her eyes locked on the battlefield. Data streamed across every screen, weapon discharges, energy fluctuations, enemy morph patterns, but none of it made sense anymore. "They're changing faster," her tactical officer said, voice trembling. "The Vrax are rewriting their structure mid-engagement. They've never done this at this scale." Another officer interrupted, panic creeping in. "No, that's not the worst part. The unknown vessel, it's adjusting too. Every strike it makes is different from the last." Saren's jaw tightened. Two predators, both evolving, and her people were caught between them. Across the void, the Dominion unleashed a new wave of attacks. Its weapons no longer fired in simple linear beams. They fractured into complex patterns, multi-vector strikes that anticipated movement before it happened. Entire Vrax constructs twisted and reformed in response, growing denser, harder, more resilient. But it wasn't enough. Each time the Vrax changed, the Dominion responded faster. It wasn't reacting anymore. It was predicting. Inside the Dominion's command core, human officers monitored the battle with cold precision. There was no panic, no hesitation, just calculation. "Enemy adaptation rate increasing," one analyst reported. "Good," the commanding officer replied. "That means they're learning." A brief silence followed. Then the next order came, steady and absolute. "Push them further." The Dominion surged forward. For the first time since its arrival, it moved. The massive structure advanced through the battlefield, its sheer presence forcing the Vrax to reposition. Smaller human strike craft deployed in waves, sleek, angular, and brutally efficient. They weaved between enemy formations, targeting weak points with devastating accuracy. Illyrian sensors struggled to keep up. "They're not defending," Serene realized aloud. "They're hunting." And she was right. Human forces didn't behave like a rescue fleet. They didn't form protective perimeters or prioritize evacuation routes. They targeted the Vrax directly. Relentlessly. A swarm of Vrax warforms surged toward a cluster of damaged Illyrian ships, attempting to finish what they had started. They never reached them. Human strike craft intercepted mid-flight, tearing through the swarm with coordinated precision. Explosions lit up the void as Vrax bodies disintegrated one after another. For a brief moment, the Illyrian survivors were safe. But that safety felt incidental, as if saving them wasn't the objective. Serene felt a growing unease settle in her chest. "This isn't a rescue operation," she said quietly. Her crew turned toward her. "Then what is it?" someone asked. She didn't answer immediately, because deep down she already knew. Across the battlefield, the Vrax began to consolidate. Their scattered forces pulled inward, merging into larger, more complex entities. Massive structures formed, layered, reinforced, bristling with adaptive armor. Their movements became slower, more deliberate, more intelligent. "They're escalating," her tactical officer warned. Serene nodded slowly. "No, they're responding." And so was the Dominion. Its outer hull shifted, revealing structures that hadn't been visible before. Entire sections unfolded, exposing weapon systems that dwarfed anything the Illyrians had ever seen. Energy levels spiked across its frame, building toward something far beyond its previous attacks. Inside, human command protocols updated in real time. Threat assessments recalculated. Engagement limits removed. A new directive pulsed through the system. Enemy escalation confirmed. A pause. Then, authorize full-spectrum response. Back on the Illyrian bridge, alarms suddenly blared. "Energy surge detected," an officer shouted. "The unknown vessel is charging something. We've never seen readings like this." Serene's eyes widened as the data flooded in. This could destabilize the entire system. She looked back at the Dominion, its massive form now glowing faintly with contained power. And in that moment, the truth became undeniable. They hadn't summoned allies. They had summoned something else entirely. Something that didn't just fight wars. It ended them. Across the void, the Vrax made their move. Their newly formed superstructures surged forward, converging on the Dominion from all directions. Space itself seemed to darken as their mass blotted out the distant stars. Annihilation was coming. But the Dominion didn't retreat. It didn't hesitate. It finished charging. And then, everything went silent. For a single suspended heartbeat, the entire battlefield froze. Even the Vrax stopped, as if instinct itself was warning them. Something irreversible was about to happen. Serene gripped the edge of her command console, her voice barely a whisper. "What have we done?" Silence broke like glass. The Dominion released its charge, not as a single beam, not as a conventional blast, but as something far more precise and far more terrifying. Space bent inward. Not around the ship. Around the targets. Every Vrax superstructure advancing toward the Dominion suddenly slowed, their massive forms distorting as invisible forces crushed them from all directions. It wasn't an explosion, it was collapse. Controlled, calculated, absolute. "Gravitational manipulation," an Illyrian scientist whispered, her voice shaking. "They're weaponizing space-time itself." Serene couldn't look away. Entire Vrax entities, things that had consumed planets, were being compressed into nothing. Their adaptive armor failed instantly, unable to respond to forces that rewrote the rules of physics. And then, one of them survived. At the edge of the battlefield, a massive Vrax construct twisted violently, its form expanding, splitting, mutating at a speed even the Dominion struggled to predict. It grew larger, denser, more complex. It was learning. "Commander," the tactical officer said, panic creeping in. "That one, it's resisting." Saren's breath caught. The Vrax had always adapted. But this was evolution under pressure. The surviving construct surged forward, its body unraveling into countless tendrils that lashed through space like living weapons. Entire sections of the Dominion's outer hull were struck, energy shields flaring for the first time since its arrival. So it could be hurt. Inside the Dominion, alerts triggered, but the response was immediate, controlled. Damage localized. Adaptation model updated. Continue engagement. No fear. No hesitation. The Dominion adjusted. Its weapons shifted again, recalibrating to the new threat. Smaller strike craft swarmed the resistant Vrax entity, targeting its evolving core. Explosions rippled across its surface, but it kept coming. Closer. Faster. More dangerous. On the Illyrian bridge, the atmosphere turned suffocating. "If that thing reaches them," one officer began. "It won't," another replied quickly. But the doubt was there. For the first time, the Dominion wasn't completely dominant. And everyone felt it. Saren clenched her fists. "Open a channel," she ordered. Her crew hesitated. "To them," the communications officer asked. She nodded. There was a pause, then the signal was sent. Static filled the air for a moment, then cleared. "This is High Commander Saren of the Illyrian Fleet," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Unknown human vessel, you are exceeding safe engagement limits. The system itself is becoming unstable. If this continues..." She stopped, because the reply came instantly. "Calm. Unshaken. Instability acknowledged." Saren blinked. "That's not a concern to you?" she demanded. A brief pause. Then, "Negative." The word hit harder than any weapon. Around her, her crew exchanged uneasy glances. "They're not trying to save the system," someone whispered. "No," Saren said quietly. Her eyes returned to the battlefield, where the Dominion and the evolving Vrax construct were locked in a deadly approach. "They're trying to end the threat. At any cost." The Vrax entity lunged. Its tendrils struck the Dominion again, this time breaching deeper. Segments of the massive ship tore away, drifting into space as debris. Energy fluctuations spiked wildly. For a moment, just a moment, it looked like the Vrax might actually overwhelm it. And then the Dominion changed. Its entire structure shifted, unfolding in ways that defied engineering logic. Sections separated, reconfiguring into new formations, weapons repositioned, energy signatures spiked beyond previous limits. "New system detected," an Illyrian analyst shouted. "We don't even know what it is." They didn't have time to understand it. Because it activated. A focused pulse, dense, invisible, unstoppable, struck the Vrax entity at its core. The effect was immediate. Its massive form froze, then began to collapse inward. Not slowly, not violently, but inevitably. Like reality itself had decided it no longer belonged. The tendrils disintegrated first, unraveling into nothingness. Then the outer layers of its body followed, peeling away as if erased from existence. Finally, the core vanished. Gone. Completely. The battlefield fell silent again. No movement. No resistance. The Vrax were gone. Every remaining signal blinked out across Illyrian sensors. Extinct. Saren exhaled slowly, her body trembling. "It's over," someone whispered. But she didn't feel relief. Only dread. Because as the Dominion drifted in the aftermath, its massive form still glowing faintly from the energy it had unleashed, she understood something that chilled her to the core. They hadn't just witnessed victory. They had witnessed power without restraint. And the beings who wielded it hadn't hesitated for a single second. Her gaze hardened. "Send a full-spectrum scan," she ordered quietly. The officer nodded, hands shaking as they complied. Moments later, the results came in. "Commander," he said slowly, "the Dominion, it's still charging energy." Saren's heart skipped. "For what?" she asked. No one answered. Because across the void, the massive human vessel began to move again. The battlefield was silent. No Vrak signals, no movement, no resistance. Only debris, vast fields of drifting fragments where entire fleets and living constructs had once existed. The stars, once obscured by war, now burned clearly across the void as if nothing had happened. But something had. And it wasn't over. High Commander Saren stood motionless, eyes fixed on the Dominion. The massive human vessel loomed at the center of it all, still radiating residual energy from weapons that had defied comprehension. "They're still active," her tactical officer said quietly. "Power levels haven't dropped. If anything, they're increasing again." A ripple of unease spread across the bridge. "They've already won," another officer added. "Why would they need more power?" Saren didn't answer immediately, because the same thought had already taken root in her mind. What if the battle wasn't their objective? "Open a channel," she said. This time, there was no hesitation. The signal connected almost instantly. Saren straightened, forcing her voice into steady authority. "Human vessel, this is High Commander Saren of the Illyrian fleet. The Vrak's threat has been neutralized. We acknowledge your intervention, but your current energy levels are destabilizing the system. Clarify your intent." For a moment, there was only silence. Then the response came. Calm, measured, almost clinical. Intent, threat verification. Saren frowned. Verification, there are no remaining Vrak signatures. A pause. Then, correction, no detectable Vrak signatures. The words hit the bridge like a shockwave. "They think something survived," one officer whispered. Saren's eyes narrowed. "You're suggesting the Vraks can evade detection?" Affirmative. A new tension filled the room. Because if the humans were right, then the war wasn't over. Before Saren could respond, the Dominion transmitted again. Additional context requested. She hesitated, then nodded, "Provide it." There was a brief delay, then data began flooding her systems. Star maps, historical records, unknown archives. Her crew scrambled to process it, and what they found changed everything. "These aren't just observations," her lead analyst said, voice trembling. "This is history, their history." Saren stepped closer. "What does it say?" The analyst swallowed. "It says their species has been at war since before they left their homeworld." Silence. "They evolved on a planet classified as a high-risk biosphere," he continued. "Extreme environmental instability, predatory ecosystems, constant competition for survival." Another officer looked up, disbelief in her eyes. A death world. The term hung in the air, because every advanced species in the galaxy knew what that meant. Deathworlders were rare, unpredictable, dangerous. Saren felt her chest tighten, and this ship. The analyst hesitated again, then said it. "It's not just a warship. It's the result of centuries of continuous conflict. Every system, every weapon built from experience. From survival." Saren's gaze drifted back to the Dominion. "You built this because of your own world?" she asked quietly. The reply came instantly. Negative. A pause. Then, "We built this because of what might come from beyond it." The meaning was clear. Humanity hadn't waited to be attacked. They had prepared. For everything. A chill ran through Saren. "You were expecting something like the Vraks." Affirmative. Of course they were. Across the bridge, the data continued to stream in. Battle simulations. Enemy projections. Extinction scenarios. Humanity had modeled threats the Illyrians had never even imagined. And they had built the Dominion to face them. Not to survive, but to win. Suddenly, alarms blared. Commander, the tactical officer shouted. New energy spike deep space sector 9. Saren spun toward the display. At first, there was nothing. Then, a faint signal. Weak, flickering, but unmistakable. Vrak's signature confirmed, the officer said, voice shaking. The bridge erupted into motion. They weren't all destroyed. No, Saren interrupted, her eyes locked on the growing signal. They hid. The Dominion responded instantly. Its massive structure shifted again, reorienting toward the new threat. Weapons systems locked on before the Illyrian sensors could fully track it. Inside the human vessel, a single directive updated. Threat persistence confirmed. A pause. Then, escalation maintained. Saren felt her pulse quicken. Human vessel, she said sharply. That signal is faint. It may not be a direct threat. We can contain it. The reply cut her off. Negative. Her breath caught. We do not contain threats. Another pause. Then the final line. We eliminate them. Across the void, something began to emerge. Larger than before. Stronger. Waiting. And the Dominion was already moving to meet it. The signal grew stronger. What had first appeared as a faint, flickering anomaly now pulsed with undeniable intensity across the Illyrian sensors. It wasn't just surviving. It was gathering. Space itself seemed to dim around the source, as if light was being pulled inward, consumed before it could escape. The stars behind it blurred, stretched into thin lines, distorted by something massive moving beneath the fabric of reality. High Commander Saren stared at the readings, her voice barely steady. That's not a remnant. Her tactical officer shook his head slowly. No, Commander, that's something new. Across the battlefield, the Dominion had already locked onto the signal. Its vast structure shifted with purpose, reconfiguring once more, but this time the changes were different. More aggressive. More exposed. Entire sections of its armored hull unfolded outward, revealing inner frameworks that pulsed with raw, unstable energy. Weapons previously hidden deep within its core now rotated into position, their power signatures spiking beyond anything recorded before. They're not holding back anymore, one Illyrian engineer whispered. Saren's eyes narrowed. They never were. Then the signal arrived. It didn't emerge in a single piece. It assembled. At first, fragments of matter began appearing, twisting, folding, merging together as if drawn by an unseen force. Metallic structures fused with organic mass, forming an ever-growing shape that defied comprehension. Then came the core. A massive dark sphere, absorbing light energy, even the sensor scans trying to define it. Around it, the rest of the entity expanded outward, forming layers upon layers of shifting armor, tendrils, and weapon-like extensions. It dwarfed everything. Even the Dominion. A hush fell across the Illyrian bridge. That is impossible, someone whispered. But it was. Because it moved. Slowly at first, then faster. The entity surged forward, its massive tendrils stretching across space like living bridges. Each one pulsed with energy, distorting the void around it. Energy absorption confirmed, the tactical officer shouted. It's feeding on the surrounding radiation, on debris, on everything. Saren felt her chest tighten. It's rebuilding itself. Stronger than before. Across the void, the Dominion didn't retreat. It advanced, directly toward the threat. Inside its command core, human operators remained calm, their voices steady despite the rising danger. Target mass exceeding projections. Energy absorption rate increasing exponentially. A pause. Then the commanding officer spoke. Good. The single word sent a ripple through the room. Lock all primary systems, he continued. We end this here. Outside, the Dominion's engines ignited, not with speed, but with force. Space bent around it as it pushed forward, closing the distance with terrifying inevitability. The massive Vrak's entity responded instantly. Its tendrils lashed out, tearing through the void with enough force to shatter smaller ships instantly. One struck the Dominion's outer structure, ripping away entire sections of armor in a violent explosion. For the first time, the Dominion staggered. Alarms flared across Illyrian systems. "They're taking heavy damage," an officer shouted. Saren leaned forward, her breath caught in her throat. The Vrax pressed its advantage. More tendrils struck, faster, harder, piercing deeper into the Dominion's structure. Energy surges rippled through the human vessel as internal systems strained under the assault. For a moment, it looked like the impossible might happen. The Dominion might fall. Inside the ship, warning indicators lit up across every station. Hull integrity dropping. Outer defense grid compromised. Primary weapon systems at risk. The room tensed, but the commanding officer didn't raise his voice. He didn't panic. He simply issued the next order. Stabilize core. A beat. Then, prepare final sequence. Across the ship, systems shifted. Power was redirected, pulled away from damaged sections, rerouted into a single, central point deep within the Dominion's core. Outside, the massive structure began to glow. Not with the steady pulse of controlled energy, but with something far more dangerous. Unstable. "Commander," an Illyrian scientist whispered, eyes wide. "Their energy output is exceeding safe thresholds if they release that." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Saren already understood. "They'll destroy everything," she said quietly. "The system, the battlefield, possibly themselves." And still, they didn't stop. The Vrax entity surged again, its massive form expanding even further as it absorbed more energy. It was growing stronger by the second, adapting, evolving, preparing for the final clash. But the Dominion was ready. Its core pulsed once, twice, then stabilized. Inside, the final command was given. Fire. The weapon didn't launch like anything before. There was no beam. No projectile, just a sudden, overwhelming shift, as if reality itself had been rewritten. The pulse expanded outward, invisible but undeniable, washing over the battlefield in an instant. The Vrax entity froze. Every movement stopped. Its massive form, once unstoppable, hung suspended in space. Then, it began to break. Not violently, not explosively, but fundamentally. Its structure unraveled at the atomic level, collapsing inward as if it had never been meant to exist in the first place. Piece by piece, it disappeared, until nothing remained. Silence returned. Total, absolute. Saren exhaled slowly, her body trembling. "It's over." But even as she said it, her eyes drifted back to the Dominion. And what she saw made her blood run cold. Because the ship wasn't stabilizing. It was breaking apart. The silence didn't feel like victory. It felt fragile. Fragments of the Vrax drifted where something unstoppable had existed moments before. No energy signatures, no movement, no hidden signals. For the first time since the war began, the Illyrian sensors showed nothing but emptiness. The threat was gone. Erased completely. But High Commander Saren didn't celebrate. Her eyes were fixed on the Dominion, and what she saw made her stomach tighten. "Status report," she ordered quietly. Her tactical officer hesitated before answering. "The Vrax are confirmed neutralized, no residual activity detected." A pause, then more slowly. "But the human vessel, it's not stable." Across the void, the Dominion was coming apart. Sections of its massive hull drifted away, torn loose by forces it had unleashed itself. Energy arcs flickered uncontrollably across its surface, jumping between exposed structures like lightning trapped in metal. Entire segments went dark. Others burned too brightly. "Power containment failure across multiple sectors," the officer continued. "Core integrity dropping." Saren clenched her jaw. They knew this would happen. The realization hit hard. The Dominion hadn't miscalculated. It had accepted the outcome. Inside the human vessel, the situation was controlled chaos. Red warning lights flooded the command decks as systems failed one after another. Bulkheads sealed automatically, isolating damage. Entire corridors were vented into space to prevent cascading explosions. And still, the crew held their positions. Core temperature rising beyond safe limits. Stabilization systems offline. Reactor containment at 30% and falling. The commanding officer stood at the center of it all, his expression unchanged. "How long?" he asked. "Minutes," an engineer replied, "at best." A brief silence followed. Then the officer nodded once. "That's enough. No panic. No fear. Just acceptance. Broadcast final status," he ordered. Across the void, Saren's console flickered. A new transmission cut through the static. Primary threat eliminated. The message was steady, unshaken. She stepped closer, her voice tight. "Human vessel, your systems are failing. You need to evacuate immediately. We can assist." The reply came without delay. "Negative." Her breath caught. "You don't have time. We are awares." The words were calm. Too calm. Saren felt something shift inside her. "Why?" she demanded. "You've already won. There's no reason to stay. You can still survive this." For a moment, there was no answer. Then, survival was not the objective. The bridge fell silent. Saren stared at the display, her mind struggling to process the weight of those words. "Then what was?" she whispered. The response came, quiet but absolute. "Completion." Across the battlefield, the Dominion shuddered. A massive section of its outer hull broke free, drifting into space as the internal structure beneath it began to collapse. Energy surged violently from its core, spilling out into the void in uncontrolled bursts. "They're losing containment," an Illyrian officer shouted. Saren's hands tightened into fists. "Human vessel," she said urgently. "If your core breaches, it could destabilize the entire system. You need to disengage now." A pause. Then, containment failure acknowledged. Another pause. Longer this time. And when the next words came, they carried something different. Not fear, but finality. "We will ensure no further threat emerges." Saren's eyes widened. What does that mean? But deep down, she already knew. Inside the Dominion, the commanding officer turned toward his crew. "Final protocol," he said. No one questioned it. No one resisted. They had known this possibility from the moment they launched. "Redirect all remaining power to core," he continued. "Prepare for full collapse sequence." An engineer swallowed hard. "Sir, that will trigger a total overload. There's no coming back from that." "I know." The room went still. Then, one by one, the crew returned to their stations. Because this was what they were built for. Outside, the Dominion's energy output spiked again, higher than ever before. But this time, it wasn't directed at an enemy. It was turning inward. "Commander," Saren's tactical officer shouted, "they're compressing their own core if that goes critical." "It won't," Saren said suddenly. Her voice was quiet. "Certainly. They're not losing control." She looked back at the Dominion, her eyes filled with something she hadn't expected to feel. "Respect. They're choosing it." Across the void, the massive human vessel began to collapse in on itself. Not violently, not chaotically, but with precise, deliberate control. Its core compressed, drawing in all remaining energy, all unstable reactions, all potential destruction. Containing it, preventing it from spreading, sacrificing everything in the process. The light grew brighter, brighter, until it was almost unbearable to look at. And then, it vanished. No explosion, no shockwave, just absence. The Dominion was gone. Completely. The battlefield fell silent once more. This time for good. On the Illyrian bridge, no one spoke. because they all understood what had just happened. Humanity hadn't just ended the war. They had ensured it could never begin again. At any cost, Saren lowered her head slowly. They didn't just save us, she whispered. They erased the threat. Her gaze lifted back to the empty space where the Dominion had once been. And themselves, for a long time, no one moved. The battlefield, once a storm of fire, metal, and impossible forces, had become a graveyard of silence. Where the Vraks had existed, there was nothing, no debris, no lingering energy, no trace that they had ever been there at all. And where the Dominion had stood, there was only emptiness. High Commander Saren remained at the center of the Illyrian bridge, her gaze fixed on that absence as if starring hard enough might bring it back. "Confirm all scans," she said quietly. Her voice echoed in the stillness. One by one, her officers complied. Long-range sensors clear. Subspace detection negative. Residual energy readings within acceptable decay thresholds. A pause. Then the final confirmation. No hostile signatures detected. It was over. Completely. Yet the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt unfinished. Saren exhaled slowly, her shoulders lowering for the first time since the battle began. Around her, the crew began to move again, cautiously, as if afraid the war might return if they acted too quickly. "We survived," someone whispered. But even that sounded uncertain. Because survival had come at a cost, none of them fully understood. Saren turned away from the viewport, her thoughts still locked on the final moments of the Dominion, the way it had collapsed, the way it had chosen to end itself rather than risk further destruction. Not as a failure, but as a decision. "They planned that from the beginning," she murmured. No one argued. Because the evidence was clear. Humanity hadn't just built a weapon to fight wars. They had built one to finish them. Suddenly, a soft tone interrupted the silence. "Commander," the communications officer said slowly, "I'm detecting something." Every head snapped toward the console. "What kind of signal?" Saren asked. "It's weak, fragmented, but it's not Vraks." Her heart skipped. "Then what is it?" The officer hesitated, then looked up. "It's human." The bridge erupted into motion. "Lock onto it. Boost signal clarity. Trace its origin." Data flooded the systems as the faint transmission struggled to stabilize. Static crackled through the speakers, broken and distorted, but unmistakably artificial. Saren stepped closer, her pulse quickening. "Put it through." For a moment, there was nothing but noise. Then, a voice. Faint. Damaged. But alive. "This is UN's Vanguard, partial systems online." The words cut through the silence like a shockwave. Saren's breath caught. "A survivor," she whispered. Across the void, something small emerged from the debris field, barely visible against the vast emptiness. A fractured vessel, scarred and broken, drifting slowly as emergency systems struggled to keep it intact. It was nothing like the Dominion. Smaller, weaker, but undeniably human. "They survived that," one officer said in disbelief. Saren didn't answer, because she was already watching the ship stabilize, slowly, painfully, but steadily. It shouldn't have been possible. After everything they had unleashed. After sacrificing a vessel that massive. Something had still endured. The transmission cleared slightly. Dominion lost, mission status complete. Saren stepped forward, her voice firm. "This is High Commander Saren of the Illyrian Fleet. We read you. You are not alone." There was a pause. Static. Then, a response. Weaker this time, but steady. Acknowledged. Silence followed. But it was different now. Not empty. Not final. Alive. Saren felt something shift inside her, something she hadn't expected to feel toward a species that had just demonstrated power beyond comprehension. Respect. And something else. Unease. Because if this was what remained after their greatest weapon had been destroyed, then what else did humanity still have? Her gaze drifted back to the stars, now calm and undisturbed. They came because we asked for help, she said quietly. Her tactical officer nodded. And they gave it. Saren's expression hardened slightly. No, she said. Her eyes returned to the drifting human vessel. They did more than that. A long pause. Then, they ended a threat the galaxy couldn't stop. The bridge fell silent again, because everyone understood what that meant. Somewhere out there, on a world they had never seen, a species existed that didn't fear extinction, that didn't hesitate in the face of annihilation, that would cross any line, make any sacrifice, to ensure the war was truly over. And now, the galaxy knew they were there. Saren straightened slowly, her voice carrying quiet resolve. Prepare recovery teams, she ordered. We bring them aboard carefully. Her officers moved without question, because this moment mattered, not just for survival, but for what came next. As the damaged human vessel drifted closer, its broken hull catching the distant starlight, Saren felt the weight of something far greater than victory settle over her. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning, because one truth was now impossible to ignore. If a single mistaken signal could summon this kind of power, then one day, humanity might not